Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Lake County, welcome to this evening's public forum on Lake County traffic issues. We have a distinguished panel with us this evening, and I will introduce them in a moment after reviewing the format for this evening's meeting. My name is Phyllis Albrecht, and I will be this evening's moderator. The format will be as follows. Each panelist, and they will present in alphabetical order, will have a maximum of 10 minutes to portray briefly his role in transportation use planning in Lake County and his perspective on the problems and solutions. Following their presentations, we will take questions from the floor. The questions can be directed to one or all panelists. Responses are limited to 90 seconds per panelist. At approximately 8:45 to 8:50, we will terminate the question period, and each panelist may make closing remarks for up to 2 minutes. I'd like now to introduce our panel. Beginning at my immediate left, we have Martin G. Bueller, who is the Director of Transportation for Lake County. He has headed the Lake County Division of Transportation for 14 years. The division is responsible to the Lake County Board for the operation of the 270-mile county highway system of arterial highways and 20 miles of bike paths. Next, Robert Krebs, who is the Regional Land Use Coordinator for the Open Lands Project, a regional not-for-profit organization that has been working to increase and enhance public open space in northeastern Illinois for the past 35 years. Before joining Open Lands Project in 1995 as policy coordinator, Mr. Krebs held several positions with local and regional conservation organizations, including Friends of the Chicago River and the Great Lakes Protection Fund. David Luchens is currently the project director for Lake County Transportation Improvement Project. In the past, he has worked for the Illinois Department of Transportation as at the District 2 Dixon office, which covers northwestern corner of Illinois, including Rockford and the Quad City areas. He held that post for 34 years. He's also held positions of geometrics designer, project studies unit head, and consultant services unit head. Mr. Luchens left IDOT in 1991 and worked for a private consulting firm, TYI Lynn International, Bascor, in Chicago as civil planning manager. Mike Trupa is a policy and communications specialist for the Environmental Law and Policy Center, a nonprofit public interest group based in Chicago and serving the Great Lakes region. ELPC has played an integral role in a local campaign to reshape Lake County's long-range transportation plan. Since 1993, he has served as communications director, policy analyst, and community organizer for ELPC's Transportation and Clean Air program, which has focused on balancing regional growth patterns through environmentally and economically sound transportation planning. He has become a leading voice for transportation reform in the media. We'll begin with you, Mr. Bueller, and I thank you all for participating this evening.
Good evening. I hope you can see that presentation with the lights. We're talking about a transportation status update. I'm way out of sequence here.
There we go.
My presentations, I'll have to do it verbally. I'm sorry about that. The status update for transportation is that we're currently in a state of stress for transportation, and it's a factor in the future quality of life for Lake County. What's the importance of this? Well, this topic is interrelated to other issues, and now is the time to address it. The current transportation system. It's a system under stress, and funding is short. Let's take a look at those three topics. First, a system. Transportation is provided by different agencies in a top-down format. The more regional agencies have more control of transportation than the more local agencies. So you have the state, the county, the RTA, the county, municipalities, and townships. We'll contrast that later. The system is under stress. If you take a look at the percentage of maintenance allocations, the dollars of budgets that are going to the systems, about half the county dollars are going to maintain the transportation system, just to maintain the system. If you look at another indicator of stress, the congestion levels, if you take a look at county roads and the miles of two-lane county roads that are backlogged or congested, you'll find that in 1990 that was 11 miles, and in 1996 it was up to 25 miles. That's a $56 million problem. We also know that funding is short. Lake County is not adequately funding its transportation system compared to collar counties. And I'm talking about the authority for the county to consider whether we want to have a local option gas tax. For future transportation systems, here are some 5 major topics to consider. The needs are driven by growth. It interacts with land use. We're going to give you some congestion warnings. It's a factor in the quality of life. And what are our current plans for the future? Let's take a quick look at those. Needs are driven by growth. For the year 2020, if you look at population and households and employment, they're all up in the neighborhood of 60 to 70%. 60 to 70% population. Let's talk about interaction with land use. And you look at the governments that control this part of the development process. Your local communities obviously have control. This is in Illinois, very high, very strong municipal governance state. So the 52 municipalities would be at the top of the list. Then the county, which only controls unincorporated area, about 10% of the building. Then townships, a few have plan commissions. Then the state has a little bit of regulatory authority. And finally the RTA doesn't have any. And development issues, you have on-site improvements that are concerned for the transportation system and off-site improvements. I think generally on-site improvements are being adequately handled. Off-site improvements, these are the impacts farther away from the development, a mile down the road, 2 miles down the road, the cumulative impact, those are not being taken care of. Congestion warnings. We have a document out here for distribution, for pickup, that has what's called a primer on congestion in it. And it just tries to give a little briefing to the complex relationship between land use and transportation, particularly between low density, remote land uses, and traffic congestion. I encourage you to take a look at that. What it's showing is that auto travel is up. It's not just up, it's way up. And it's also showing that transportation investments have not kept pace. The result, not surprisingly, is congestion's building. Let me go over that again. The congestion warning is that travel is up, transportation improvements are not up as greatly. There's a mismatch there. In terms of some quality of life items, we're finding from our Economic Development Corporation that the people in the business communities are concerned about business climate as how it relates to the transportation capacity, affordable housing, where do the workers live? They have to live up in Kenosha County, drive down, the ability to get quality workforce, and the recruitment of entry-level professional and technical employees. These things are starting to play seriously in Lake County. If you look at other quality of life issues, I mentioned remote land uses. This is the desire for everybody to live away from everything else. We have a community, I live in Grays Lake, our adjacent community is Third Lake. They've allowed a Phil's Pizza place to be constructed, and it just so happens to be adjacent to Grays Lake. And you'd believe all the calls that the county is getting over this issue because it happens to be on a county road. Nobody wants to live next to a pizza place or a factory or a grocery store, anything like that. They want them remote uses. They also want low density. If you go around the county at the zoning hearings, you'll hear density, density, density as a concern. Well, it has to be asked, what are the mode options for travel that comes out of those desires of people? And it's automobile is a lot of times the only option. We also have to be concerned regarding transportation system improvements of air quality issues. We have to be concerned about how this all relates to greenways initiatives, bike trail initiatives. We just completed and are working on a second leg of a nice bike trail here in Lake Forest, the Skokie Valley Bike Trail. It won't solve any congestion problems, but it will help improve our quality of life a little bit. We have to be concerned about how drainage interfaces with transportation system improvements and wetlands. Lake County has the highest percentage of wetlands of any other county in Illinois. So that means no matter what project you do, whether it's a new road or existing road, any project, you're going to be touching wetlands, and you have to be able to manage those impacts. We are involved in creating a wetland bank with the Forest Preserve District. Well, we'll create more wetlands than we'll destroy, and that's an important policy issue of the county. Some current plans for the future. You're going to hear about the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project from Dave. The county's committed to cooperating with that and planning for the future. Some other current plans for the future. We currently have a year 2005 transportation plan, and we need to update that to the year 2020. We like to plan for 20 years into the future. We're still working on adequately financing our transportation system, so the issue of whether we want to consider a 4-cent user fee up here or not is still on the table. And impact fees. What should the developers pay towards these improvements? The General Assembly recently changed the law to require us to plan for that for 20 years instead of 10 years as it was. In summary, our transportation system is currently in a state of stress. Investment is lacking, and there are implications for this both on an economic level and an environmental level. Something that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Mr. Krebs?
First slide, please. Nothing influences transportation as does land use. And of course, nothing influences land use as does transportation. This statement speaks to the heart of two of the most pressing issues that face Lake County today: loss of open space and increasing growing traffic congestion. At the same time, this simple statement speaks volumes about how our region has developed over the past 50 years and the consequences of that development as we plan for the future. Open Lands Project has been working on the land use and open space side of this equation for the past 35 years. In fact, we were founded in 1963 to increase and enhance public open space in northeastern Illinois. And some of the projects that we've worked on have been protection of the Medewan National Tallgrass Prairie, the former site of the Joliet Arsenal, protection of part of Fort Sheridan for the Lake County Forest Preserve District, the Illinois Prairie Path, and others. We also are very active in other regional planning initiatives, such as our Regional Greenways Plan, which was co-authored with the Northeastern Illinois Planning Commission. And finally, we have an urban greening department that works exclusively on urban open space issues in the city of Chicago, although as the region grows, it's beginning to move outward. Next slide. One of the most exciting projects that we're working on right now is the Solar Mapping Project, otherwise known as Strategic Open Lands at Risk. And this mapping project is loosely based on a similar project that was undertaken in the San Francisco Bay Area by the Greenbelt Alliance. And it comes out of the recognition that as much as we're working to protect open space, the region is growing and land is being consumed at such an alarming rate that we need to get a grip on what's happening and take a broader perspective and illustrate in a graphic way what this land use looks like. So 4 of the goals of the Solar Mapping Project are: first, to educate the public about regional land use patterns and their consequences; second, to identify significant natural resources at risk of development; and the third is related to the second, to focus land preservation strategies in areas where there's high risk for development, high pressure for development, and high natural resource value. And finally, it's helping to serve Open Lands Regional Advocacy Agenda to focus our regional advocacy efforts. The Solar Study Area comprises not only the 6-county Northeastern Illinois region, but it also includes Grundy and Kendall counties as we expand outward. It includes parts of southeastern Wisconsin, Kenosha and Walworth counties, and also Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties in northwest Indiana. And even though we started out as a 6-county organization, we're realizing that the influence of metropolitan Chicago is spreading much beyond the 6 counties. The process that we've worked through over the past year and a half has been a collaborative process with the Metro Chicago Information System Center. They've been our mapping consultant, and we've conducted 4 main objectives. First is data gathering. The second has been focus group outreach, and then mapping and analysis and advisory group review. The first 2 have fed into the mapping and analysis and advisory group review to advise the creation of 3 products that are coming out of the Solar Mapping Project. Next slide, please. These products are a historic growth map and report, an at-risk map and report, and an infill opportunities map and report. And the historic growth map and report has been released recently, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It was titled Losing Ground, and what it has done is chronicled the consumption of the Chicago metropolitan area's land over the past century. It's taken a snapshot of developed land at the turn of the century, then at 1950, and then current land development as influenced by a variety of factors, very much including transportation. The second product is the at-risk mapping report, and what this product will do is it will illustrate the urbanized area of the region. It'll also show areas at risk of development in the next 10 years, and then other areas at moderate risk of development over the next 30 years. It will combine these risk areas with already preserved open space, and more importantly, significant natural resources that are not yet preserved that should be focused for acquisition. And finally, an infill opportunity map and report will focus our efforts on redeveloping parts of the city of Chicago and some of the satellite cities. Next slide. 3 of the highlights or lowlights of the Losing Ground report, as they may be. First, it illustrates that per capita land consumption is increasing at faster and faster rates. We see this every day. We all recognize the consequences. Second, it illustrates that modern transportation systems have promoted a formless and ever-expanding urban area. And finally, that uncoordinated rapid development has created a regional footprint that now spans 3 states. Now, this is a draft of the Solar Historic Growth Map that's part of the Losing Ground report. And you can see the area in red here is the developed footprint of the region at the turn of the century. By 1950, you see some growth here in pink, but mostly on established commuter lines. Then the dramatic picture is this orange yellow area, which shows the growth that happened between 1950 and 1996, at a large part due to increased mobility and transportation. Next slide, please. Consequences of this low density sprawl development. Well, one of the most obvious ones is increased traffic congestion. Others are population decline in mature communities, high demand for costly new infrastructure in these developing communities, isolation and concentration of poverty in areas that are left behind, a loss of sense of community, and the issue that's most close and dear to our heart is loss of open space and now farmland. Some of the other points that Losing Ground makes is that between 1980 and 1995, vehicle miles traveled increased by 50%, while the population grew only 6.4%. So more people are spending more time in cars and they're traveling greater distances. From 1950 to 1995, the regional population grew by 48%, but land development grew by an astounding 165%. And finally, more locally, since 1950, Lake County has lost about 100,000 acres of its farmland. Now, there's good news and bad news about the challenges that face our growing region. Next slide, please. The good news is that because these problems are interrelated, there's a broad and growing movement of citizen groups, businesses, civic organizations, and even politicians that recognize that these problems are the most pressing problems that face our urban community and our growing urban community as we face the next century. The Metropolis Project of the Commercial Club, the Campaign for Sensible Growth, which is a partnership that is co-sponsored by NIPSI and the Metropolitan Planning Council and has broad participation of environmental groups, business groups, transportation providers, government agencies, is another of these regional partnerships. The Smart Growth Task Force has recently been set up by an act or a resolution of the Illinois General Assembly to look at loss of farmland and the effect of urbanization of the state and region. And finally, both gubernatorial candidates have committed and expressed strong concern about land use and its effect on quality of life and loss of open space, traffic congestion, and have committed to smart growth strategies. Next slide. The bad news is there's no silver bullet or quick fix to any of these problems. One transportation improvement project is not going to solve the problems of Lake County. Even a system of transportation improvement projects are not going to solve the problems of Lake County. It's going to take changes in land use planning. Admittedly, there will be some need for additional transportation improvements, but certainly not ones that have the effect of creating lower density sprawl and more low density growth in the county. Next slide, please. Finally, in summary, some of the solutions that Open Lands Project is working on, more specifically around open space preservation, are an increased and aggressive commitment to open space acquisition and preservation. Second, new and improved strategies to protect the region's disappearing farmland. In our region, a lot of the open space that people identify with isn't really open space at all, but it's farmland, and this farmland is being gobbled up at alarming rates, and we really have no strategy for protecting any of it. When you look at other states throughout the country, Illinois ranks pretty low among states in terms of priority for protecting farmland. And finally, state and local leadership, especially local leadership and cooperation in smart growth strategies for land use, infrastructure maintenance, and improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krebs. Our next panelist is Mr. Lucinas.
Good evening. For about 41 years and about 70 pounds ago that I started in this business. And over those years, I've seen a lot of changes. But one of the things that's been pretty constant throughout those years is the need for a lot of information, a lot of good information, in order to come up with the best solution for any particular problem. The Lake County Transportation Improvement Project is about gathering that information and developing a solution based on the information that's gathered. I've been on the job for about 6.5 weeks now, and I've been traveling around Lake County, getting acquainted with the area. I've experienced the stop and go of Lake County traffic. That's the title of your program tonight. And that, of course, is the problem that we are seeking the solution to. Transportation projects are publicly funded, and they start by an inclusion in a regional plan. In Northeast Illinois, that regional plan is developed by input of planning efforts of several agencies that represent all levels of government and modes of transportation also. The result is the 2020 regional plan. From the regional plan, each agency, such as IDOT, Lake County Division of Highways, Metro, and so forth, develop their own plans. And then individual projects are developed from the agency plan. The point is that any individual plan that's included as part of this transportation system is just that, part of a system. None of them are standalone. They all have to work in concert with each other. Accommodation of the skyrocketing growth of population and employment drawn to the county presents a challenge to all providers of public service, including transportation. This is one of the challenges that's confronting the project. The most evident example of the transportation challenges is the traffic congestion. In the same period, the population in Lake County has greatly increased. Highway capacity has only been expanded very modestly. There are many viewpoints on how traffic could move better. Your viewpoints, as well as all those other motorists stuck in the traffic, form the many ideas about the solution to the transportation problems. This is another challenge to the project. The Lake County Transportation's project role is to be a collector of those ideas and to apply them to the development of a solution. Let's take a look at some of those challenges in a little more detail. Look at the population growth. A nearly 30% increase in 15 years, and even by the most conservative population forecast, there will be a 32% increase by the year 2020, up to over 740,000. I come from a county, by the way, that's about 40% larger than Lake County in area, and the whole population of our county is less than 40,000. So it's really quite a revelation to me. Another indicator of challenges to transportation is the growth of employment. As you can see, the employment in Lake County has increased even faster than the population, more than a 60% increase in the last 15 years. And by 2020, we look for another 34% increase. So we have a population that's grown by nearly 30%, employment that has grown over 60%, and roadways in that same time being expanded by only 5%. The result, traffic congestion. Congestion that affects our quality of life and costs all of us in lost time and accidents. Tonight I'm here to tell you about my role in developing solutions to the problems of stop-and-go traffic in Lake County. My role is defined by the objectives of the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project. First and foremost, our objective is to establish a dialogue with all the persons who have an interest in Lake County transportation. This is a theme you'll hear me repeat over and over again because it's the key to the success of this project. Secondly, the project will identify transportation needs and develop alternatives to address these needs. Identification of the needs will include the public involvement process, There will be several alternatives to look at, but they will all involve multiple improvements and include roadway and transit components. And the final objective is to develop a solution that will best address the needs, the public expectations, and minimize environment and socioeconomic impacts. Think of the many roads in Lake County as arteries that contribute to the life of the county. And also think about how Lake County interacts with the areas around it. It's because of these relationships that the project must consider a large area and the influence of that area on any set of improvements that constitute an alternative. Therefore, the project study area is larger than a traditional study area of a project. It covers not only Lake County, but covers portions of eastern McHenry County and northern Cook County. As I said, the number one objective is to expand communication. It's my goal to include the broadest range of persons interested in this project in the process of arriving at a solution. There's three levels of communication: the general public and interested groups such as we have here this evening. It's important to the project that we provide information to the general public and interested groups, but it's equally important that we have an exchange of ideas at these forums. And that's why I'm looking forward to the question and answer period. As we need to be, and we also need to be in touch with the government agencies at the county and local levels, as well as the regulatory agencies. We also want to establish communications with your elected officials. There's several ways that the general public can communicate with the project. For all of you surfers, there's the internet. There's a lot of information there and a way to communicate with us. It's www.lakecountytip.com. Project newsletter will be distributed within the next 2 weeks. There's a response sheet in there that you can be sent back postage paid. We'll be scheduling public information meetings and hearings. The first general public meeting will be in late January. Periodically, we'll issue news releases. And we have a project office where you can drop in and chat with us. Drop in anytime from about 8 in the morning till around 4 in the afternoon. You may want to phone ahead to make sure that one of the staff members are there. And if you can't make it in those hours, give us a call and I can arrange something. This job is my life. And I can go up there in the evening and talk to you too. Interested groups can be involved through our Speakers Bureau. Small group meetings can be arranged. Contact our office. And the website's also available to the small groups. The project office is there for you. It's up on Midlothian Road, just south of Gilmer Road. It's in an area where there used to be open fields, but the other day they started grading the field across from us to build more homes. There are several opportunities for participation in the project by government agencies and elected officials. There's regular county board meetings, municipal groups, the technical advisory groups, and that'll meet next in October. Resource agencies meet with our staff regularly, and we also will be meeting with federal and state legislators. I want you to look at this slide. I've told you how this project is part of a regional plan. I've discussed the project challenges and the broad reasons for congestion. I've described the objectives of the project and the study area. I've discussed the extensive public involvement program and how we are trying to get the broadest representation of interested persons to participate. Now, how are we going to put that all together and proceed towards a solution? The study, as large and complex as it is, can be described in 4 steps that constitute the 2-year time frame that we are about a quarter of the way into. What is happening right now is the identification of the needs. This phase is nearly completed and will be discussed in a public forum within the next few months. The next step is the identification of logical sets of alternatives that address those needs. These sets will include individual projects that involve expansion of existing roadways, enhanced transit facilities, and new highways. Some alternatives will include all 3 components, and some will have just 2. Initially, many alternatives will be examined. We are starting some of this work now, and we'll be discussing these in public forum later this year and early next year. The alternatives will then be evaluated, and the number of alternatives reduced through the evaluation process. At each round of evaluations, all alternates will be evaluated with an equal degree of detail, so we have a true comparison. This work will be carried on throughout much of next year. There'll be several opportunities as we do this for all interested persons to participate in the evaluation. And finally, the solution. A final set of improvements will be identified as the recommended alternative. What do we get out of this project? The study will identify a range of transportation improvements that collectively will help relieve congestion and will provide a blueprint for transportation providers to build from. The study will provide a decision regarding the extension of Illinois 53. If Illinois 53 is included in the recommended alternative, a second 2-year study will be conducted, and that will examine in detail design issues and impacts involved with that project. And finally, in the course of this study, a lot of information is going to be developed, and that can be used by Lake County for land use and transportation plans. We're here this evening because growth in Lake County is producing a crushing amount of traffic congestion. This congestion can erode the quality of life that prompted many of you to locate here. And as I've traveled around the county in the short time that I've been here, I see the many beautiful sights that you do enjoy up here, and I can see what draws you to this county. I kind of equate a quality of life with a sense of well-being and happiness. Next time you're the 35th car in line, backed up at a signal, which could be on your way home tonight, look at the motorists around you, but don't make too long of an eye contact, you know about road rage. But how many happy, smiling people do you see behind the wheels of those cars? There's congestion now, and it's not going to go away, and it's not going to get any better doing nothing. A wise old philosopher named Mike Ditka once said, "Nothing ever stays the same. It either gets worse or it gets better." If there's a viewpoint that we should all be able to agree on, it's the viewpoint that a solution to the congestion must be sought and implemented. And I certainly agree with Rob Krebs. No one project is going to solve the transportation problems in Lake County. It's going to take a number of things to happen. And I hope that we can all work together and work towards those. And I'm pretty excited about being part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luton. Our last panelist is Mr. Trupa.
Thank you. I want to start out by expressing my gratitude to the League. This is actually the first time in 5 years that the organization of groups that I work with has had a chance to air our views on an equal footing with our counterparts at the Toll Authority and IDOT. And this is a real watershed, and I hope it harkens better for the future. And there's a lot that we do agree on, absolutely. First of all, let me quickly say something about my organization. I work for the Environmental Law and Policy Center. We're a nonprofit organization that is based in Illinois and has a long lineage here in Lake County. I'm also representing an alliance of Lake County organizations called Citizens Organized for Sound Transportation, and we have jointly been working on studying Lake County's transportation issues for the better part of the 1990s. And it bears saying emphatically that we echo the principles embodied in the state's study of transportation improvements here in Lake County. And that's why we've already done the study. If the state is on a quest for answers about the right investments for Lake County's transportation future, I believe that we've already identified them, and I'm going to talk about that. First of all, let me give you the basic premise of the study. The study is called Crossroads, and that name is meant to connote the point in time that we find ourselves here in Lake County. We are at a pivotal juncture for all the reasons that Marty, Rob, and Dave have already discussed. The groups that cost represents come from a variety of different perspectives, some of them environmental, some of them good government, some of them supporting just standards of good fiscal prudence, but they're all united in a belief that the decision that this county makes about its transportation future will leave a dramatic and indelible imprint on the character, the quality, and the physical shape of life in Lake County for the next generation. And it's going to be reflected in far more than the number of cars on the road. It's going to reverberate in the number of people who live here. You're going to see it in the number of people that we have to school. You're going to see it in your tax bills, the amount of money that you have to pay for additional public services. You're going to see it in the amount of open space that we have to sacrifice for increasing development and growth. These are the challenges, and it's important to view the quest for answers about Lake County's transportation future as more than just answers to how we're going to get around, but answers about where the county's going and what it's going to look like when we get there. I think we can all agree, though, if we're looking for answers, it sounds like we can all agree on what the fundamental question is. How does this county combat rising traffic congestion and at the same time curtail the uncontrolled development that has caused traffic congestion to accelerate so dramatically in recent years? And these two aspirations, curing traffic congestion or at least containing it, and minimizing the encroachment of development, are the two consistently ranked as the two most resonant, important aspirations and desires that people in this county, residents of this county, have expressed year in and year out. So my organization and COST set about trying to answer those questions with the first ever comprehensive review of transportation investments here in Lake County. That's Crossroads. And we joined ranks with the University of Illinois Chicago and a transportation consulting firm to develop a methodology by which we can predict travel demand here in Lake County over the next generation. Specifically, we're looking towards the year 2020. Now, there's two major factors or two major components in trying to assess what future traffic volumes would be like. One is what our assumptions are about what the future transportation network here in the county will look like. And second, what our assumptions are about the growth levels. How many people will be working here? How many people, more importantly, will be living here on a day-to-day basis that will need to get around, because those are the contributors to the daily traffic volumes that this transportation network will have to handle. Our assumptions about the transportation network in the future and about the amount of people who will be living here and consequently the travel demand are the same as the state's. We assumed that in 2020, the transportation network here in Lake County would be consistent with the long-range transportation plan that the state has adopted for Lake County. That includes a number of new improvements, but the ones that seem to attract the most attention are, of course, the Route 53 tollway, the $1 billion, actually $1.2 billion, 25-mile extension of Route 53 through the heart of the county, along with some surrounding improvements to the existing road network. And it's important to keep in mind that the plan to build Route 53 has always assumed that there would be improvements to surrounding roads in order to accommodate the flow of traffic onto and off of Route 53. It's analogous to building a major new pipeline up the center of the county, and if you don't provide any valves or any outlets to alleviate that pressure, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be stuck there. So obviously you have to make improvements to the existing road network. Secondly, as far as the questions about how much growth we predicted, we use the state's assumptions for a number of people who would be living and working here in the year 2020. Now, fortunately, we did our study about a year ago at precisely the same time that the state did something unprecedented here in the Chicago region. For the first time, it projected what growth levels would be like with and without various transportation investments here in Lake County. What we found is actually a very key point. Keep in mind, under the plan to build Route 53, the state is projecting that 60,000 additional people will be living here in Lake County. That's an increase in the otherwise projected growth levels of 20%. Now, the state has said, and some people will argue, that not all that growth would be attributed to Route 53 because the plan also includes additional service on the Wisconsin Central. And you know, that's a valid point. And certainly, some small margin of growth would occur if you added additional trains on an existing rail line. But without question, the massive amount of the growth that would occur would be attributed to Route 53. And we can say this not just because it's reflected in the state's own forecast, but we can also say it because it's something that the toll authority has proudly said for more than 2 generations. I actually have some transparencies, and I hope it's okay if I walk over here.
I think if you'll take this mic.
Okay, sure. I'm just going to show this briefly. It's dense with a lot of text, but what it basically does is tell a simple story. This is out of the Toll Authority's 1993 annual report, and it's something that they've said quite often over the years because it's something that they're proud of, and there's reason to think that this is good, but you also have to wonder about what the impacts are. If I can get it into focus. Thanks. This is a contrast of what happened at the inception of the tollway system, or a comparison of what life was like, say, in DuPage County, if you look at the second line down, at the inception of the tollway system, and what life is like now. Then, when the tollway opened, the DuPage County was a farming community with a population of less than 300,000. Now, DuPage County has become a thriving research and development corridor, home of 29,000 businesses, 450,000 jobs, and more than 800,000 people. Some of that's good, but no doubt there's a dramatic, demonstrable impact there. There are a lot more people living in DuPage County, and I would suspect that most residents of DuPage County will say that there's a lot more traffic than there was 40 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 10 years ago. So this is something that really there's no dispute about. And what we really have to now consider is, now that we know what the future holds if we build the Route 53 tollway, we have to analyze what the impacts are. When you have more people, you have more traffic. Our computer analysis showed that with the 60,000 additional people, or roughly 60,000 additional people, that would be living here under the plan to build Route 53, you're going to have 250,000 additional trips on the road network every day. 250,000 additional trips. And again, those are 250,000 additional trips on the existing road network, because whether they're taking Route 53 or not, no trip begins or ends on Route 53. No one backs out of their driveway and gets onto a tollway, and you have to take the existing road networks to get on and off of it. So that means that there's going to be a lot more traffic congestion on the roads. Now this is, I'm about to show something that hopefully won't cause people to go cross-eyed. This is an attempt to show, if I can get it, there we go. It's an attempt to show in red and green, and it really is just important to keep in mind the relative distribution of red and green. This is the existing road network, and this is the projections for what things will look like in 2020. And as my fellow panelists have told you, things are going to get worse. There's going to be more traffic congestion. This is the plan without Route 53, and you see that red symbolizes growing traffic congestion. There's going to be more on many roads, and the green shows where there's going to be some traffic relief. What's important, again, is to keep in mind the distribution of red and green. This map reflects the installation of Route 53. And as you can see, there's not a heck of a lot less red. In fact, there's more. And there's no more green. This is what $1 billion will get us. And this is why the conclusion of the Crossroads study is pretty simple. Sorry. All that we're saying is that the state, the county, the organizations that are planning transportation for Lake County's future can get more with less. The beauty of the Crossroads plan was that we didn't invent any assumptions. We simply used the information that was already produced by the state. And our message is that the state can do what it wants, but to be more effective, it should just do less of what it wants. The process we'll spend less money, more than $1 billion less. We'll attract less development, We'll have less encroachment on the environment. We'll have less of a strain on our public services. We'll have fewer kids to have will be schooling. We'll have fewer library books that we'll have to provide. We'll have less police and fire protection that we'll have to pay for. And I guess most importantly, we'll have less traffic congestion. This isn't a panacea, but clearly the monopoly on the public debate has been owned by the Route 53 tollway proposal for most of the last decade. And in the meantime, there really hasn't been a lot of a discussion about anything else. And we certainly welcome the discussion now. We wish it had happened a little while earlier, but maybe many years earlier. But we also wonder why we just can't get on with the business of doing what obviously works more effectively. If the question is how to fund it, there are ways. So far, the toll authority has been the beneficiary of more than $100 million in taxpayer subsidies from the Illinois Department of Transportation. As many of you know, the Illinois Department of Transportation is responsible for improving these existing roads that I talked about in the Crossroads Plan. Toll Authority has more than $350 million in the bank. And we've heard a lot lately about how there's a shortage of funds at the Department of Transportation to do anything different, or to spend or to finance anything different. We have to wonder, though, why the Toll Authority simply just can't reimburse the $100 million that it doesn't need, that it's received from the Department of Transportation, because $100 million could go a heck of a long way towards making needed road improvements here in Lake County. In addition, there's been a proposal that's been floated at the state level in Springfield to consider ways in which we might be able to free up some of the money that's basically, if it's not gathering dust, and it's certainly gathering interest in the Toll Authority's coffers, we might be able to use some of that money to fund improvements to the existing roads. There are answers. We just have to be imaginative and innovative about it. There's been no limit to the innovations as far as considering how we can plan to build Route 53. It's time, though, that we innovate a little bit more about how we can finance doing something different when it's clear that building Route 53 will lead us down the wrong path. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists for their excellent and informative presentations. And we now have the opportunity for questions from individuals in our audience. If you wish to direct a question to either one or all members of the panel, please raise your hand so that I may call on you, and one of our ushers will direct you to a microphone. Please state your question briefly and succinctly so that we can make maximum use of the time available for questions and answers. And toward this same goal, the panelists have been asked to limit their responses to 90 seconds. So I will entertain questions, and do I have an usher who's going to help me with the microphone here?
I guess they're on.
I don't want to blame for any faulty engineering here.
Okay, just, all right, if you'll just stay off to the side here, and then a question? Yes, right there. I'm going to come on over with the, yeah. It might be useful if you would, I'm not so important that you express your name, but if you'd be interested in indicating the community that you're from, it might be helpful. That's your choice, but it might be useful for other members of the audience and the panelists.
My name is Amy Parker. I represent State Representative Lauren Beth Gash from the 60th District. I live in Deerfield. I don't live close to 53, but I am interested in the way this debate has shaped up over time, and Mike alluded to the fact that a lot of the debate has been controlled for a long time by state transportation officials who mainly build roads. And
What is your question?
I do have a question for one of our panelists, David Lutyens, correct? It's not really clear to me who funds the transportation project that you're working on, and who pays your salary, and what is the nature of that project? Could you clarify that for us, please?
Sure. The Lake County Transportation Improvement Project, all of the contracts with the consulting firms that are involved, with myself, are administered by the Illinois Toll Highway Authority. The Illinois Department of Transportation will provide a 50% reimbursement, and so it's basically funded 50-50 by the tollway and IDOT.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Yes.
Hi, David Luchins again. When you get through with your needs and evaluations and just get to the decision points, since a majority of the controlling emphasis here is being done through IDOT and Illinois Highway Authority, who is going to be actually deciding, looking at the information, which alternatives make sense and which ones will be pursued?
Okay.
Well, 90 seconds is not very much time to respond to that one, but basically, the state agencies, the Toll Highway Authority and the Illinois Department of Transportation are by statute charged with making those kind of decisions. That's the job of those agencies. And so the final decisions will be made by those agencies based on recommendations that come from the study that's being prepared by the consultants and being reviewed by myself and the staff. Rest assured, though, that the decision will involve a lot of input from the public, as I stressed quite a bit here tonight. I've never been involved in a transportation project that was built that didn't have a lot of popular support. And that won't be the case here.
Would any of the other panelists like to respond to that question? If not, the next question.
Yes, Phyllis, I want to commend the league also for holding this, and not to my surprise, neither the Tollway Authority nor IDOT are here. I think they probably thought you would be slanted toward quality of life.
Well, I'm not sure they were invited, but...
Oh, well, I thought somebody was. I had written a question, and little did I know that Mike Trooper would really touch on it, but it has to be really asked to somebody in the transportation field. And the fact is that a state-sponsored study by IDOT did conclude that even if the extension of Route 53 were constructed, major arterial highways would have to be approved. Now, if this is true, doesn't it seem logical that the state should begin by constructing the major arterials and see what that does to our traffic system? And then also, since at least $35 million were spent toward the right-of-way purchases for the extension, doesn't it then seem logical that that money paid by us by gas taxes, not tollway revenues, should be used for those arterial improvements?
Okay.
That's probably one Marty should handle.
All right, Marty, would you like to respond to that question?
When you come to a fork in the road, take it. Yogi Berra said that one.
Okay, thanks.
John, if I understood your question, it was, should the money be used to preserve right-of-way? And should there be money used to preserve right-of-way, preserve options for the future? I can only answer that from a transportation professional's viewpoint, and that's a very legitimate, in my view, professional view, that's a very legitimate use of funds to preserve the options for the future, not lock out any options.
Would any of the other panelists like to respond to that question?
Dave?
As far as the building the arterials first rather than 53, as a matter of fact, there probably will be several arterial improvements built before 53, if indeed it is ultimately decided that 53 should be built. At this point, that's still something that we're looking at. But there's going to be a lot of arterial improvements built in any event. Just as Rob said, there's a lot of projects that are necessary to handle the transportation problems, not just one.
But what funds are they going to use?
Well, the arterials will all be built with your motor fuel tax money. And that's why you pay that money at the gas tax, to get your roads improved.
Okay, anybody else wanted to respond? Yeah.
Yeah, just to amplify what actually John just said, I think it is important to keep in mind that, since literally the 1960s, IDOT has been banking land and reserving it to build Route 53. Now, if Route 53 is a bad idea now, it was certainly a bad idea in 1960, but that's almost beside the point. The point really is, if we can show that kind of commitment to building the Route 53 tollway, and we now know the Route 53 tollway is going to make the problem worse, then certainly we can show that kind of commitment to making improvements to the existing road network. And there really is no reason, especially since it is the Department of Transportation, the very agency that would have to make improvements to the existing road network, that is instead banking land for the toll authority, which certainly doesn't need the financial help, as everyone here who's ever taken a tollway knows.
Okay, anyone else wish to respond?
Well, just briefly, I'd like to, point out that I think we've all recognized that we are at a crossroads here, and the time to act is now. And whether spending money to preserve right-of-way while there are pressing transportation needs and other needs in the county, whether or not that's wise use of funds, I don't think so.
Okay. Yes, in the back. Can you wait a second for the microphone? Oh, I'm sorry. Over someone. Okay. The mic's over here. I'll call on you next. I'm sorry about that. Yes.
Hi, my name is Bob Holler, and I happen to live next to the tollway. And I don't want to pick on anybody, so I'm going to direct a question to the panel, even though it's a little slanted. It's my understanding, it's a little bit before my time, believe it or not, but when the Tollway Authority was formed, that it was generally considered to be a temporary organization, that it was going to pay off the bonds that were taken out to build the authority. Then the tollways were going to become freeways, and there was not going to be a toll authority anymore. And my question is, I guess, if that's the case, when might we expect that to happen? And the second part of that question is the Tollway Authority really in a good position to make an objective judgment with regards to expansion if it seems their very existence and jobs are dependent upon ongoing projects?
Okay. To all of you, Mr. Trooper?
To the first part of the question, however long you'd have to wait for the tollway to keep its promise to at least reduce, if not alleviate or eliminate tolls on existing roads, you'll have to wait a lot longer if it succeeds in its bid to extend Route 53 as well as 355 through Will County. One of the things I didn't have a chance to mention, and it's an untold story, unfortunately, is the financial ramifications of building Route 53. The road costs $1.2 billion to build. Problem is that the ridership levels on the road won't be high enough to meet the financing costs. That's $1.2 billion that the toll authority is going to have to borrow. Over time, that's a lot of debt. The Route 53 tollway is projected to lose $55 million a year, each year over the first 25 years of its operation. That's money coming out of the pockets of people using the existing tollway system, and it further delays the day, maybe into perpetuity, if the tollway ever keeps its promise.
Any of the other panel? Oh, yeah.
The second part of the question I just wanted to answer was, our only concern about the objectivity of the state study is that, again, the toll authority does one thing, it builds tollways. Secondly, the heads of the two agencies that are funding this project, Ralph Winter of the Toll Authority and Kirk Brown of the Illinois State Department of Transportation, have already publicly professed their support for the project. They professed their support for the extension of Route 53, even though they're spending $7 million to purportedly answer whether Route 53 is even needed. That's troubling on a number of levels, but it goes to the heart of whether this study can be credible or not. Maybe it can be, but I also wonder whether our state officials should be jumping to conclusions like that before they even have any evidence in front of them.
Mr. Luchins, did you want to respond to that question?
Well, number one, I'm here tonight as a spokesman for the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project. I'm not here as a spokesman for either the Toll Highway Authority or the Illinois Department of Transportation. I'm an independent, and I don't really work for either one of the agencies. But, you know, the toll we're picking a lot on the Toll Highway Authority here. But, and the study itself. But the people that are involved in the study are very open-minded about this. We're all pretty hardworking and dedicated people. We're not ogres out trying to destroy Lake County or anything like that. We're making an honest, open-minded study to come up with a solution. And the heads of the departments have professed support for Illinois 53. But in order for that to actually happen, it is going to have to be supported by a study. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And there's been other studies, but this is kind of an update of those, and we're taking it further. We're using the current state-of-the-art information and proceeding from there.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs?
I'd just like to respond to that, and you may be very well-minded, but we can't look beyond the fact that the approach is a transportation approach, it's an engineering approach, and the problem is much broader than transportation and engineering. It's a land use problem, it's a regional problem, it's a statewide problem, and it may not be up to your boss or your job in particular, but what we're dealing with here is a much broader issue, and we need more state leadership on a variety of levels to answer the problems that face Lake County and our region.
Mr. Bueller?
And I agree that there's a lot of issues involved, and now's the time, as I mentioned earlier, now's the time to address those issues, discuss them. There's always pros and cons with everything, and there's pros and cons with doing nothing, and very serious pros and cons with doing nothing in terms of people's quality of life. We're going to have a lot more people living in this county in the next 20 years, and we have to plan for that and discuss all the issues involved in what's going to happen when all those people show up there.
Thank you. Okay, now someone that I tried to call on earlier, would you raise your hand again? Somebody back in this corner.
Her question's been answered.
Oh, all right, that was addressed. Who else has a question for us? Okay.
Pat Jester from Deerfield, and I come hoping to hear more about something other than the tollway. And I lived in Vermont, and you did mention something about land use there. I know that, if you buy land there, farmland, you can't build on it for a long time. You can't split it up. Has anything been thought through the Illinois about doing something like that? Coming from Deerfield, that we have a lot of streets blocked, you can't get through, which puts everything in Waukegan Road. If you could open up, the subdivisions don't have to, you go down one road, you go into your place. You've got to have more roads that go through. You get on to Fort Wilmette, there's a lot more roads. It's a lot more things you can do other than talking about the tollway.
Okay, now, you want to put that in the form of a question? You have a question about the farmland?
Basically, this farmland, are we thinking about some other things here other than just Route 53? I mean, there's a lot of roads that need
Opening
help.
up other arterials
Exactly.
and farmland.
I'd like to respond to that at least again. At least on a statewide level, there is some movement towards addressing the loss of farmland in the state and in the region. There's not much currently on the books that helps farmers keep their lands from conversion to urban uses. Right now, the only real thing is a voluntary agricultural districting program that allows farmers to get together and set up districts of 350 acres or more, but there's really no teeth to protect that land from being converted. One of the things that may need to be looked at seriously is the purchase of agricultural conservation easements programs and a broad array of open space acquisition programs, not only focused on farmland, but on parks and recreation.
Yeah. Mr. Bueller, you were last time. We'll let you move up a little bit in the line.
I work for Lake County government, which is also Lake County Forest Preserve District government, and I understand that you'll be able to vote in April on preserving open space land, if you want to tax yourself to do that. I voted for every one of them so far, and I intend to vote for that one. I think it's important.
Mr. Trupa?
Yeah, I think the one good thing about this is that we don't have to talk about Route 53 so much anymore if we actually are sincere about studying other alternatives. And I think the only problem has traditionally been that the debate has pretty much been monopolized by whether to build Route 53 or not, as opposed to looking at the wide range of other alternatives at our disposal. And some of those alternatives do include not just transportation improvements, but land use policies, as you mentioned and as Rob talked about. I think it's very important that we consider how different land use scenarios affect transportation, and as Kirk Brown noted in the slide that Rob showed, I mean, that has a dramatic influence on how transportation investments work. No one is saying do nothing. That's the one thing that we can certainly all agree on, if nothing else. No one is saying do nothing. What we are saying, and we're saying emphatically, is let's look at everything we can do. Let's find the right thing, the thing that works. Let's no longer let's stop harping on Route 53, A, before we even know whether it works, and B, now that we know that it doesn't work, let's start looking at something different.
Mr. Luchins?
Well, I agree with just about everything that Mike said, other than we don't know yet if 53 isn't going to work. That's part of what we're looking at. They have one traffic model. Their traffic models, I'm not going to get into a big debate about traffic models. Frankly, I'm not an expert on traffic models. But there's a lot of input that goes into them. And there's traffic models and there's traffic models. There's some others. We're using a different system that we're looking at it. But eventually, we're going to get to the point where we'd probably like to take the ELPC's model and apply it to our alternatives, and let's see what happens.
Okay, the microphone is here, and if you'll pay attention to the other two hands that are up and get to the next, we'll call on this question first. We'll get to all of you. We've got plenty of time.
My question is for any of the panelists who would care to answer. What kinds of reasons could you give me as to why Lake Forest or Waukegan or any other Lake Michigan shore community would want 53?
Mr. Bueller, we'll start with you.
I'll answer it this way. I think what those communities need to look at is what happens if you don't have 53. The transportation system doesn't operate as little small entities. It operates as a system. So as congestion builds in one area, people use some other road. You're always trying to find the quickest and easiest and shortest way for yourself to get where you want to go. So those communities have to look at, and that's what the purpose of the models is that Dave mentioned, is that it will do this analysis, is what is the impact, if there isn't, on existing roads. What we hear in a lot of places now is traffic is using shortcuts through communities, that the communities don't want the traffic there. And why is that occurring? That's the question. Is it going to continue to occur in the future as more and more people cause more and more traffic, or will they go some other way? So that's the question that needs to be answered.
I can't come up with any reason why communities to the east or the west or even in central Lake County, aside from maybe isolated cases where somebody jumps on the Route 53 and shoots in one direction, that anybody would want this road. It's been noted that Route 53 will cause more traffic congestion in Lake County and increase development in the county. And in a county where open space is shrinking, I don't see how anybody can be in favor of that.
Mr. Luchins?
Well, we're kind of talking here like Illinois 53 is already part of the solution, and as I said before, I don't know that it's part of the solution yet. Some people have indicated that it is. As I said, there's many points of view, and that's one of the things that we're looking at. But let's, for example, let's just say for a minute that 53 is built. What would be the advantage of it? One of the things, and it's what Marty kind of touched on too, it's kind of like when you build a rocket ship or something, you have a lot of redundancy in your systems because you don't want to be forced into using one particular route, and so you try to offer some alternatives to people to use. And so this would be, for say people using the tri-state, it would be another option for them. That's one view that you could use. But as I say, this is not, it's something that we're still looking at, so I'm not going to try to debate the advantages and disadvantages of Illinois 53. It's premature for me to do that. If we get to the point where the recommended alternative does include that, then that will only be done if there's, like I say, widespread support for it, and there's a lot of facts and figures to back it up. Then I'll be glad to debate that issue, but at this point, it's premature.
Okay.
I don't think it's premature at all. I think that there's ample information at our disposal as to why communities along the North Shore, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, so forth, would actually have a reason not to support 53. I do agree with Rob that there's not a reason, that there's no reason why they should support it. There is a reason why they shouldn't. Our study shows that traffic volumes on most of the major north-south arterials in this area, 41, 94, and some of the others would actually increase if 53 is built, and this is because of two things, really. A, the amount of additional population that 53 attracts to the county as a whole. B, the way it redistributes trips. The development that 53 is projected to bring would occur mainly in the midsection of the county. That creates a lot more places for people on the North Shore to have to go. We're talking about employment as well as residences and shopping. So it's going to cause increasing traffic levels on the North Shore as a function of the increased population growth. I don't think that there's really any dispute about that, and I don't know why it's not just simply possible to accept that premise rather than spending another $7 million to come to the same conclusion in 2 years. And I do want to point out, I put these on the table outside. This is a brochure that summarizes our study. I would encourage everyone to take a copy of it as they leave. I also have additional copies up here. It's very easy to read, and I'd be very grateful if you took one. And please ask me if we've run out there.
Okay. Looks like our usher has decided, and I think it's a good idea to have questioners perhaps form a line. That will save a lot of time. So if you'll just turn the mic over to the first questioner, please.
Thank you. I want to preface my question with 2 points. First, this month, the Illinois Environmental Council came out with some figures that are the federal government's that say that the Chicago area exceeds safe air standards every 6 days. Or it might even be 4 days. And the second part of my point is that also World Watch Institute puts out a magazine, a monthly magazine, and this month they are talking about livable cities. And the livable cities that they cite are Portland, Oregon, and then there's a city in Brazil. And the reason that they're so livable is because they have a transit system that's formed like a wheel around the city, and it's connected on all parts, going all the way around the city. Since we are an old train area, and we have all of these train lines, and we do have all these air problems, I'm wondering what is being done in the area of trying to make the Chicago safer for our kids, and for all the older people that have a hard time breathing in our air. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone like to answer that? Respond to that? Okay.
There was 2 questions. One was the air quality concerns, and the second had to do with transit lines and an example community. First, the air quality concerns. As I mentioned in my presentation, that is a valid concern that all regions throughout the United States have to address. It's not just Chicago, it's not just LA, it's all metropolitan regions. And there's a variety of activities that are being undertaken to meet the federal requirements to plan for this region for the year 2007. Some of them may affect your lifestyle pretty dramatically, and you may not like them. An example of that was the employee commute program that was law and was such disastrously received by the public that got changed. So that's a complex issue that's being addressed. The second issue had to do with a circumferential transit line. Part of the Chicago region's 2020 plan, which was mentioned, includes such a line. It's called the EJ&E Railroad. It goes through Lake County, starts in Waukegan, and goes around. And there's money earmarked in the plan to build a segment of that. And that's an interesting line because rail right now works great to get downtown Chicago. You can get on here in Lake Forest and everybody goes down there, good access. But if you want to go someplace else in the region on rail, you have to go downtown and then you can't get out. If I could continue 1 second on that.
1 second.
Okay. This proposal would give you an option. If you can take a circumferential, then you'd be on the outer end of the line, and the trains are all going in. It may make more options available for people in travel.
Mr. Cripps?
Well, I think as we look to expand our transit options and transportation access, transit should be a major mix in that, and transit-oriented development is a way that that transportation can be used to foster more compact development, have less of an impact on consumption of land, and to the extent that those strategies can be used, we're very supportive of that.
We'll be looking at transit components of all the sets of alternatives that we're developing. But one of the things, and I don't remember the exact figures, so I really shouldn't quote them, but I was just told today, as a matter of fact, that they had looked at the relationship, or they had decided how far would a person be willing to walk to a train station. And they thought, well, maybe a quarter of a mile would be reasonable. And then they took all of the stations and the transit lines, and they looked at that, and they found that the majority of people in Lake County live within walking distance of a train. However, only about 3% of the trips that are made in Lake County are done on transit. 97% are still done by automobile. We live in a democracy, thank heavens for that, and so you used to have freedom of choice. And most people have chosen to use automobiles as their mode of transportation. We will be working with the transit companies, with Metra and PACE, to look at things that might make use of transit more palatable to people and try to encourage the use and put that mix in. But nevertheless, the vast majority of people are still going to use the automobile as their mode of transportation.
Mr. Trupa?
That's absolutely true. The vast majority of people will. But one of the things that transit does is it shaves off a certain percentage of traffic at peak hours of the day. All transportation planners will tell you that congestion, and it's your own experience, generally congestion is at its worst in the morning and evening rush hours when everyone's trying to get to work or back home. A transit line that can reduce that peak hour traffic congestion by a small margin, as much as 5%, can make a dramatic impact in the way that you experience congestion. And as far as democracy goes in the way that the public responds to traffic, I have to say that there's been a pretty resounding plebiscite here in Lake County in favor of additional transit service in the form of the Wisconsin Central line. The line is brimming with ridership. It has exceeded expectations. It has skyrocketed through the roof. I think that this harkens well for the future, and what it underscores is that we've talked a lot about what we shouldn't do. That symbolizes what we can do. We can do something that actually makes the problem a little bit less harmful, that costs less money. We can do something that reduces traffic congestion that people do want. And we just need to start thinking a little bit more creatively, maybe just a little bit more positively about things that the public wants, rather than things that an individual agency wants.
Thank you. Next question?
Well, actually, my question was just that. I was going to ask if any serious consideration had been given to increasing the rail lines, which I feel has got to be less environmentally devastating than a new tollway. It seems that... I'm sorry, question.
All right.
My question will be to Mr. Lutyens. I want to know when, you say that you may consider the crossroads study, but when will you give it some credibility? Mr. Trupa tonight has given us figures, he has given us data, he has overemphasized so many times that this has already been done, and it just seems that we're just going to repeat this again. And again, I'd like to see that money be put towards some research towards increasing metro lines.
All right, Mr. Lutyens, would you answer that question or respond to that question, please?
Sure. When we have reached the point where we've identified sets of alternatives, I've offered to use Mr. Trupa's program or model to run it with our systems to see how it compares.
Okay. Nick, yeah.
Well, that's the first time I've heard that offer tonight, but it still is an offer that we'd be interested in discussing. What I am concerned about is only that, I mean, we have made other offers in the last 8 months since the inception of this study, roughly, to get more involved. We've tried to become a part of the transportation, the technical advisory group that the study has impaneled. We have made many efforts to express our point of view as part of the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project. But so far we really haven't received any sort of welcoming response. This, of course, happened before Dave got there, and I don't mean that, and I certainly hope that may mark a change in regime. What I do know is that in I believe it was May, we asked if we could become part of this technical advisory group, and we just got our response back. I'm sorry, it was early June. We just got our response back about a week ago, and it was a form letter telling us what the transportation project wants to do. Well, we already know what it wants to do, but we'd really like to know how we could get more involved.
Sounds like you have an entree. Next question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Martha Marks. I'm a Lake County Board member from River Woods. My question, actually, I would love to ask a series of short questions of Mr. Lucian.
I think in fairness, we have many people lined up and about 20 minutes left for questions, so
I'll lump them all together then. Mr. Lucian, you've said that you're not a member, you're not here representing the Tollway Authority, nor are you representing IDOT, and I understand that you're representing the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project. And we've talked a lot about the tollway, so I don't want to talk about the tollway. I'd like to talk about the process by which that decision and this study will be made. And I'd like to focus on one particular aspect of that, which is the hiring or the involvement of the public relations firm, Hill & Knowlton, in that operation.
What is your question?
Well, I'm trying to get to it.
Well, you need...
Okay, I'm trying to get to it. Are you familiar, are you aware of the long involvement of the organization Hill & Knowlton in such things as the Tobacco Institute, the various things? I believe that the state of Illinois is currently suing Hill & Knowlton. I have a wonderful book which I'd love to show people called...
I think we have your question.
You have
Okay,
the
well,
question.
I get
The
the
question
I
is...
think we have the question.
The question is, if your survey, your study, is being brainstormed or driven by the company Hill & Knowlton, which has a long history of frankly, irreputable dealings with the American public, what evidence do we have that this study will have any credibility whatsoever?
Well, number one, Hill & Knowlton is not involved in the engineering of the study and the analysis that will be made. Secondly, the Hill & Knowlton people that are working with us on the project were nowhere near this firm when they were working on those types of things. It's a completely different set of people that we're working with. And thirdly, what they're helping us with is things like this meeting tonight. It's part of our communications. That's their big role with us. It's not setting any policy. It's not determining what the appropriate solution is going to be. That's all going to be done by our staff and the other consultants. They're communications people, and they're helping us with that thing. They're helping us set up meetings where we can get out and talk to the people. Steve, who was with me here tonight, ran the machine. I'm not a high-tech person. We would have been in a big trouble if I'd had to run it myself. And so they're helping us with things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. As far as Hill & Knowlton goes, I'm not out to vilify Hill & Knowlton. Some will suggest that they can do that just fine themselves. But no, seriously, a public relations firm is generally hired. Well, they're hired for a number of reasons. One, to communicate with the public, but normally they represent the interest of their client. In this case, their client is the Illinois State Toll Highway Authority, which does one thing: it builds tollways. It also has adamantly and repeatedly and unwaveringly expressed its support for the construction of Route 53. It's a reasonable proposition, then, that Hill & Knowlton and the money spent on this public relations firm is being spent to influence public opinion to support the construction of 53. It becomes more than a reasonable proposition. It becomes actual fact when you get a hold of Hill & Knowlton's report that they provided, or strategic plan that they provided to the Illinois State Toll Highway Authority, detailing how they're going to use the Transportation Improvement Project to convince people that Route 53 is beneficial for Lake County. This is why we continue to have concerns about the credibility of the study. The copy is available for anyone who wants to review it. I have additional copies back at the office.
Thank you. Next, did either of you want to respond to that? Okay.
Just that it's obvious I need help with our technology. Maybe the county can afford to get us a PR firm.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Chris Stride, and I live in Lake Bluff. We've talked a lot about north-south improvement, and other than Lake Cook Road and the discussion of Route 22, particularly in the northern and central part of Lake County, what discussion is there about east-west road improvement for traffic flow? That's my first question. And as an alternative,
You have one question.
well, it's a two-parter.
Stack them together because it's only 90 seconds.
Okay, all right. I'll catch you after the program. Thanks.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Bueller and work our way down.
East, west, north, south, they're all the same. The congestion is on every direction you can imagine, northwest, east, west. It's all where people want to go. There's limited options as far as our transportation system to build what would be called new links. You know, if there's not a road there now, could you put one in? And with all the development in the county, there's very few places that can be seriously considered anymore. There's not going to be a whole lot of them. So east-west, you're pretty much stuck with what you got, I think. Can we improve those routes, or can't we?
Anybody else want to respond to that question?
No, just to amplify the last thing Marty said, which is, I mean, the question also becomes, can we improve the routes that we already have, and what will that do to alleviate traffic congestion? And the evidence is that it will do good. It will relieve some traffic congestion. So now the question is, how do we do it? How do we improve the existing east-west roads? We provided some of those answers. The time has come for the state officials who are responsible for doing this to free up the resources, because the resources exist.
I'll try to go quickly. My question's for Mr. Bueller. While we're waiting for all these long-range studies to determine what's best to do, why can't Lake County fix the man-made engineering disasters for traffic? I try to sit through many lights where, okay, everybody's lined up trying to go southbound, and northbound gets to go first and longest.
Okay, question is...
There's a lot of man-made disaster on the road.
All right, I think that you...
If I can interpret your question, it's can we do better at making our existing traffic signalized intersections operate better? Without better. And we are trying to do that. The county's been successful in securing, and IDOT has also, securing a special pot of federal money called CMAQ. It stands for Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds. And a portion, you can only use those funds on projects that improve air quality. And one of the candidate projects you can use it on is traffic signal interconnection. And we've had 4 projects ourselves at the county level, and I know IDOT's had quite a few throughout the region. With the technology, the electronics that is coming out now, it's a lot, there's a lot better equipment to do that. You know, they're using fiber optic cables, you know, like they use with the telephone transmissions instead of the coppers, and it does a lot better. It doesn't break down as much. So there is a lot of that going on. And if you have any in particular that is on your list,
stay after the program, please. After the program. Does anybody else wanted to respond to that, or can we move on to the next question? Next question. Next question.
Yes. My question is for Mr. Bueller. My name is Bill Holloman. I'm president of Illinois Citizen Action. Most of us would like to be able to see transportation and other things in Lake County work so that we can fill in the areas of the county that already have infrastructure in place. That includes, of course, Waukegan, North Chicago, Zion, and the communities along the lake shore. Now, many years ago, this was addressed because one of the problems is getting to these communities, and so tens of millions of dollars are spent to build what was called the Amstutz Expressway. I'm wondering if any of the plans that are being considered will involve recouping the $100 million loss at this point that is involved in the building of that. The purpose of that was to bring transportation into the shore.
I think they have the question. It's regarding the Amstutz. In the interest of time, I'm going to let Mr. Bueller respond to that.
I think the question is what happened to the Amstutz Expressway?
No, are you going to work on it to make it a doable expressway?
Well, let me first answer what happened to it. there was an alignment study that was done and a route picked out. The community, and part of it was built. In the interim, the community decided not to pursue any further action on that route, and the alignment has been lost. It's been given over to development.
Well, I hope the rest of our planning does better than that.
All right, next question, please.
I love the Amsteds. Got us here. Anyhow, I'm Shirley Goldman from Waukegan. Marty Bueller mentioned wetland banks. Are we guaranteed that the wetland mitigation banks created by highway engineers are as good as the wetland banks created by nature?
Okay, who would like to answer that?
I'll be happy to.
All right, Mr. Bueller?
First of all, the wetland banks aren't created by highway engineers. They're created by the wetland scientists, the ones that we're involved in. We purchased into Don Hayes Bank up in Wadsworth, which is an international famous bank. And we're also working with the Forest Preserve District at the Thunderhawk Golf Course, which is run by their staff. And they say that they can do it. Now, keep in mind that our impacts on wetlands are rather minor. We have existing roads, there's wetlands adjacent to them, there are some filling that go on to improve those transportation systems. That's part of the negative side of improving the existing transportation system. There are impacts to doing that, and we feel that it's better to mitigate those impacts in a bank where it's a much bigger area, you get economies of scale and more environmental functions out of it than trying to do a little bit of work on site. So I hope I've answered your questions.
Okay, anybody else want to respond to that?
I'd certainly like to add to that the jury is still out on wetland banking and its effectiveness to replicate what nature does on its own. And certainly, when a natural wetland is lost, it's not replaced. And I think we should focus our energies on preserving the wetlands of Lake County to the greatest extent, and not put too much faith in wetland banking. It's a very new science, and the jury is still out on it.
Mr. Luchins, did you want to comment on that?
Well, it's early in this project to talk about wetlands and what the impacts would be, but the general policy is to avoid wetlands. You start doing that. You start with avoidance. If for some reason that's not practical, then you go to minimizing, and then lastly you go to mitigating. And so when it gets to the point where we know about wetland impacts on this project, then we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we'll start out, if indeed we get to that point where we're actually designing something, our first goal will be to avoid any wetlands.
Mr. Troopa, did you want to comment on that question?
I'll just amplify what Rob said. And it is obviously, in as much as 53 goes, because we've heard this for the last 5 years, that the policy is to avoid, then minimize. And that, certainly if 53 is going to be built, that would be the policy. Obviously, the best policy, if your objective is to avoid, is not to build. And I would say that's the easiest way to avoid the wetlands.
Okay, next question.
My name is Jennifer Johnson. I represent the village of Long Grove. This question is for each of the panelists. I'd like to know if there are any land use organizations or environmental groups, watchdog groups, and citizens organized for the environment, local planners, those types of people, represented on the Transportation Improvement Project or included in the Technical Advisory Group. If so, I'd like to know who they are.
Okay, maybe we'll start with you, Mr. Bueller, and work our way, unless somebody else wants to answer that first, we'll go down the line.
I think that's a question for the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project, which Dave is representing.
You're right, it is a question for me, and I don't know the answer. But I'll find out.
All right.
I can speak for Open Lands Project.
If we keep, yeah.
Speaking for Open Lands Project, I know of no invitation that's been made to us to formally serve on any technical advisory panel or to be otherwise included in the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project. I did have a stop by their office earlier this week and enjoyed my visit, but there's been no formal invitation to us.
There's certainly, at the technical advisory groups, the next one that's coming up is probably mid-October, and we have a pretty full, we try to limit those meetings to a certain length, and we try to limit them to 2 hours, which is the length of the meeting tonight, and you know that it's getting pretty long. So probably it wouldn't be possible at that time, but we certainly would, the next one is in December, and let's talk about, some presentations to the technical advisory group then. Let's see what we can do. We're certainly not adverse to hearing the different viewpoints. As I said before, that's what we're about.
Okay. Anybody else want to respond?
Just briefly, it's heartening to hear that. There's hope for change. We so far have had reason to be concerned. The organizations that I represent here, NITE, Citizens Organized for Sound Transportation, has asked to be involved in the technical advisory group. Has asked to be involved in other aspects of the project. It showed up in June with a contingent of 9 public officials, elected officials from Lake County, county board representatives, and state representatives to express its concerns because they read in the paper that this is what the project wanted to hear. It wanted to hear citizens' concerns. It expressed its concerns, it delivered petitions, and the next day it read in the paper that the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project officials were calling these groups extremist and mischaracterizing their position. Again, Dave wasn't there then. There's hope for change, but there's also cause for concern.
Okay. We are going to have a chance for each of you to have a closing statement, so if you want to go back to that question. We're starting to run close on time here. Next question.
Yes, my name is Susan Garrett, and I would like to know who is addressing the gridlock and traffic congestion on highways 22, 60, and 176, and what specifically, what plans are in place to relieve some of that traffic congestion?
I think we'll start with Mr. Bueller on that.
I think as was indicated, that's part of the overall study of transportation in the county as part of the Lake County Transportation Improvement Project, and that's why the county is interested in participating, because we need to update our transportation plan. Currently, it's on the books for the year 2005, and that's getting pretty close for planning purposes. We need to get to the year 2020, and so we know that there's going to be a lot more people and jobs and employment and households up here, and we need to see what the impact of those is going to be. We do have several projects underway ourselves to address things in the short term. You mentioned Illinois 176 at St. Mary's Road. We'll be having a project going there starting up soon, so that's something in the short term.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? We have approximately 6 minutes left for questions and answers.
Some of those routes are in, as I said earlier, I'm not a spokesman for IDOT tonight, but I do know that some of those routes are going to be improved. I know that Route 22 is. I'm especially interested in that one because right now while I'm on this job, I'm residing in Lake Zurich, and I use Route 22, and I can't get out in the morning because the traffic is backed up so much. So I know what you're talking about on Route 22. And they do plan on making improvements to that. And those improvements will be done regardless of what we're talking about tonight.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and I'm sorry to say that will then be time for closing statements.
Yes, my name is Carol Calabresa, and my question is to David. After 8 months of study here in the county, have you reached any determinations yet?
Well, it hasn't been going on for 8 months. As far as me determining anything, I've been here about 6.5 weeks. But where we're at in the study is we're still in the process of identifying, and I almost hate to say this, needs, but because I'm sure that all of you are out there saying, what do they mean, needs? We all know what the needs are. But you still have to look at those and identify specifically where they are, because as you develop sets of alternatives, you want to make sure that you can accommodate as many of those needs as possible. So you have to, say, quantify them or look at exactly where the worst ones are so you can prioritize.
When are we going to hear about these findings?
Well, the next technical advisory group meeting is in, I don't have a specific date. We did have a specific date, but it got changed, so I don't have a specific date right now, but it's going to be sometime in mid-October, and we're going to talk about some of those issues then, the deficiencies and so forth. There will...
County board member, will I be privy to some of these findings soon? You came to the county board committees, and I'm just wondering if we're going to get some of that information. I mean, that was early in the spring when you did focus groups with
Ms. Calabrese, I wonder if you might be able to, I mean, if you want to give a very brief answer to that, perhaps you could talk directly with him afterwards so that we have time for other respondents.
Well, we want the county board to have that information, and we'll work with you as soon as we have it kind of tabulated. That's what we're in the process of doing right now, but you're certainly welcome to have that information, as is everyone. We're going to do this in an open manner, and every step of the way, as we develop the stuff, it will be available.
Anyone else want to respond to her question? Yes.
Briefly, because I know there's going to be other questions, I do think we know what the needs are. There is a need, a dire need, to improve the county's existing transportation network. There is a need for our state officials to show the same creativity, the same imagination, and the same basic willingness to spend resources on something other than the Route 53 extension. When that happens, you will see improvements. And the only question is why it can't happen now, and I haven't heard a good answer to that.
Okay, we have time for one more question. If the question is briefly stated, and if it's directed to all respondents, if they will limit their responses to 30 seconds. That's about the time we have left. Our next questioner.
She was actually ahead of me, but I have a point here. I had a neighbor, well, I'm with this lady here. One of my best friends died of cancer, and he happened to live right on 22, and Marty, you said that, or was it David? You live off of 22?
Needs to be a quick question, or we're not
Anyway,
gonna
when
have
this is
answers.
going to cross, this is affecting her greatly. The last couple of 3 years, they wanted to sell their property. He died after a couple of years with this disease. There are thousands of people along this route. If you guys don't get on the ball and find out whether you're going to build this thing or not, I'm asking you, when will you get done with the study? Can we get any kind of a time? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years? Could it be built in 10 years, or is it ever going to be built?
All right, that's a question, and I assume you're talking to directing it to Mr. Luchins? Or to Mr. Bueller, too. Go ahead.
The Lake County Transportation Improvement Project is dealing with a lot of issues. And Route 22 is what we call part of our baseline scenario, where these are projects that are going to be built regardless, and everything is analyzed on that basis. I can't tell you the exact timing of when Route 22 is going to be built. I think a lot of the work has been done on it. It's a matter of funding at this point.
Okay, all right. Does anyone else, we've got about 30 seconds left for response. I don't mean to be dictatorial, but we're on it.
Well, maybe I misunderstood. He's talking about if the decision is made to build 53, when would that be built? Is that your question? If that's the question, number one, if the decision was made, the process that we're going through is such that it would probably be in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 years if everything went smoothly.
Anyone a quick 30-second response to that? Okay, if not, then we will now move on to the next phase, which are 2-minute closing statements by each of the panelists. And we will, I think, begin in reverse order and start down at this end and work our way down the alphabet.
Should I stay here?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Hopefully I can be succinct in closing, especially since I only have 2 minutes. It's unnatural for me. But I think the point I really want to drive home, inculcate into the kind of collective consciousness here tonight is we've talked a great deal about how things are going to get worse. We've heard a lot of prophecies of woe. And we also heard some concern about all the harping on Route 53. I think it's important that the fundamental message doesn't get lost here. There is a possibility for improvement. I'm talking about that, what's in the Crossroads plan. It represents an improvement. It represents things we can do that work. It represents things that we can fund. So this really should become a discussion about why we can't start right now doing the things that we know work. I would prefer not to harp on the Route 53 extension myself. After 5 years of having to deal with educating people about the hazards of building it, particularly the fact that it doesn't work and it's going to run a massive deficit, I prefer to start talking about some other things too. And I'm looking forward to the day when the state will start talking about some other things so that I don't have to talk about the hazards of building Route 53. The bottom line is there are improvements that can work, that can take care of traffic congestion, that we can fund. Spending $1.2 billion on Route 53, running a deficit of $55 million a year for 25 years to build Route 53, attracting 60,000 more people to the county when Route 53 is built, making the environmental problem, the encroachment on the environment worse after Route 53 is built, is not the right option. The right option is to do things that curtail the impact that population growth has on the county's environment, on its natural resources, the things that attract people here in the first place, and things that curb traffic congestion itself are the things we need to do. And fortunately, we do know what the solutions are that can head us in the right direction to achieve both of those objectives. That is simply improving the existing roads, the roads that we ride on today, increasing existing transit services. It will cost less and it will be more effective. And the time has come to start working on it.
Well, the project that I'm involved with, right now, we're about a quarter of the way into this 2-year study that I mentioned before. It possibly will have a second 2 years, maybe it won't. That just depends on what the outcome of the first 2 years is. But in all of the years that I've been involved in transportation projects, and I've sat up in front of groups like this many, many times, and I've also heard a lot of negative comments about projects, and I've heard those over many, many years too. And all of these projects are involved in an open forum. That's the thing that I need to stress the most to you tonight, and the thing that I want to take away, that I want you to take away with you. We're not dealing with one particular issue here. We're going to answer that question, should 53 be extended or not. And when this study is concluded, if that is going to be, this is probably the last time that the issue is going to come up. This study is either going to, it's going to resolve that one way or another. This is probably the most heavily public involved project that I've been involved with in all of the years that I've been working on projects. It's the most open that I've ever been involved with. My career goes back before the National Environmental Policy Act. And back in those, you talk about studies, you're tired of studies and so forth, but you know the reason you have these studies is because a lot of laws were passed to make sure that various features were protected. Thank heavens for the environmental people who brought us an awareness about wetlands and other issues. And I think we're all better off for that, and I don't dispute that at all. But the reason that we have studies is to make sure that the highway improvements that we do build, if we do build them, have the minimal amount of impact to them. That's why we make these studies. When I started out, your public hearing was plans spread out in the trunk of the design engineer's car, and then the bulldozers came the next day.
The clock is ruling tonight. Mr. Krebs?
I'd like to close by reiterating that the solutions to Lake County's problems do not lie exclusively in any one transportation plan or even a system of transportation improvements. In fact, some transportation improvements might make the problem a lot worse than it is. Could cause increased traffic congestion, greater low-density sprawl, and loss of open space. Open Lands Project is committed to pursuing greater acquisition funds for public open space in Lake County and throughout the region to change the effect of regional growth patterns on our region and in Lake County, to pursue an active strategy to protect the region's farmland, and to pursue land use policies that reduce the impediments to mixed use and compact development. And finally, in terms of transportation options available to Lake County, I continue to caution the group to look at transportation improvements that not only meet the traffic congestion problems, but also look forward and make sure that these traffic congestion problems aren't improved at the expense of creating new traffic nightmares.
Okay, Mr. Bueller.
I think it's been an enjoyable debate. I really enjoy debates where transportation is a hot topic because I've been in this business for 24 years, and a lot of the years it's not a hot topic and it's not as enjoyable or exciting. We live in an exciting time. As I mentioned in my presentation, that this transportation system is currently in a state of stress, and it's a factor in our future quality of life in this county. Those things are important. It's interrelated to a lot of issues. This is the most complex issue that most people ever come in contact with in their lives. And now is the time to address it. We have put this publication out here. It's our executive summary of our transportation improvement program, what we're doing in the next 5 years. There's a lot of good information in there on transportation. If you didn't get a copy, come on up and we'll mail you one. But the words are connecting people, lifestyles, and the economy. And that's what we're all about. That's why we need to solve this, because it involves people, involves people's lives, involves their lifestyle, what makes them enjoy life. And basically, it's their job, too. What you can do in your job revolves around the transportation system, how well it works for you. And so I've enjoyed being here.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Lake County, I would like to express our thanks to our panelists and to the League's Transportation Committee and its chairman, Mary Matthews, who planned this evening's forum, and to our audience for their participation and their thoughtful questions. Thanks also to Lake Forest Cable TV for cablecasting this program. Thank you all. Good night.